You don't need to chase anymore. You've become the thing they were all chasing. Have you ever wondered why, after all the inner healing, you feel more lost than ever? Why the fire that once drove you now feels like ash? Why the silence inside you is louder than any battle you've ever fought? Maybe it's not because you're broken. Maybe it's because you're finally awake. When a man finally faces the shadow that has stalked him from the corners of his childhood, when he stares directly into the abyss and it does not blink, what remains is silence. Not triumph, not joy, but a vast, unmovable silence. And from this silence, many young men ask, why do I feel no drive anymore? Why, after all the inner battles, do I have no motivation left? Carl Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To face the shadow is to strip yourself of illusion. You destroy the lies you were raised with, the masks you wore, the roles you played, and in that moment, something dies. What dies is the false self. But what rises? What now fuels the fire? This is the crossroads every man reaches after confronting the darkness within. You fought your demons, but now you stand still, wondering, where do I go from here? In that stillness, you must learn something vital. Your motivation was never supposed to come from fear. It was never supposed to be fueled by pain alone. When you lived through trauma, anger, or shame, it gave you energy. But it was borrowed energy. It was survival energy. And survival is not the same as purpose. Nietzsche warned of this trap when he said, be careful when you cast out your demons that you do not throw away the best part of yourself. What was driving you before may have been your rage at your father, your fear of failure, or your need to prove something to the world. But once those shadows are faced, you no longer need them. And when the fuel is gone, the engine stops, unless you change what powers it. Many young men mistake that emptiness for weakness, but it's a space being cleared for something new, authentic will, not reaction, not revenge, but true direction. A man came to me once, trembling in silence. He said he used to wake up every day furious, ready to conquer the gym, the world, to rise above every insult, every slight. But after years of self-reflection, after therapy, journaling, meditation, he said, now I just feel numb. I don't care about winning anymore. I looked at him and said, good. Now you are ready to do things not because you want to crush others, but because they align with your soul. There is a great loneliness that comes with growth. Kierkegaard called it the dizziness of freedom. Once you realize that you are no longer chained by your unconscious, by your past wounds, you must now create meaning. No one will give it to you. No enemy will hand you your purpose. That's the burden of awakened masculinity. Freedom without direction is a curse. Michel Foucault said, maybe the target nowadays is not to discover what we are, but to refuse what we are. Refuse to be just a reflection of pain. Refuse to be only the product of a broken home or a competitive culture. Refuse to be what your shadow demanded. You must now build a new engine. Let's say you're a 25-year-old man who used to wake up early because you hated the idea of being poor like your parents. Every rep in the gym was a punch to your past. Every dollar earned was vengeance. But after healing, that hate evaporated, and so did your fire. This is where most men give up. They think, I've lost my edge. You've just lost your shackles. Now you must move from survival to creation. Joseph Campbell taught that the hero's journey does not end with the battle. It ends with the return. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek, he wrote. But what he didn't always explain is, after you retrieve the treasure, you must walk it back into the world. You must build. You don't go back to war. You plant crops. You raise sons. You write books. You teach. You build companies that change people's lives. You become a creator, not a fighter. But creation is slow, and it demands something harder than adrenaline. It demands vision. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, when a man finds that it is his destiny to suffer, he will have to accept his suffering as his task. But once the why is found, he can bear almost any how. What you need now is a new why. Not to impress, not to dominate, not to escape, but to build what only you can build. You might feel tired now. That is natural. The sword has been dropped. The war within is over. What follows is the construction of an inner kingdom. But kingdoms are not built in a day. When you face your shadow, you disassemble the scaffolding of your identity. That's why many men lose interest in everything. Work, relationships, hobbies. They think they've fallen into depression, but often they've fallen into truth. You are no longer interested in chasing dreams that were never yours. Seneca, the great Stoic, said, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." You were once sailing toward escape, recognition, or conquest. Now those ports are behind you. You need a new destination, one you choose freely, one that is difficult, slow, worthy. And until then, you may drift, but drifting is not drowning. It is recalibration. So what can a young man do day by day when all his old motivations are gone? First, stay in motion, even without fire. Wake early, not because you're inspired, but because discipline is the bridge between death and rebirth. Go to the gym, not to sculpt a body of war, but a temple of peace. Learn skills, not for applause, but for mastery. Begin to build habits that are not fueled by insecurity, but by love for the future man you are becoming. You may not feel excited, and that is okay. The hero does not always feel heroic. The builder does not always feel inspired. But each brick you lay in this silence is a step toward something holy. Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote, "Suffering is the sole origin of consciousness. And so, young man, if you suffer now in stillness, it is not your end. It is your awakening. You are being called to something higher, not louder, higher. When you no longer need to prove your worth to the world no longer controls you. But then you must ask, what will you do with your freedom?" And that, my brother, is the question that will shape the next chapter of your life. You've emerged from the storm, and now the silence feels unbearable. The battle with your shadow gave your life a certain weight, a certain gravity. It was chaotic, but it had purpose. Now you find yourself floating in an open space, no longer tethered to hatred, trauma, or the need to be seen. And you wonder, why can't I feel alive anymore? This emptiness is sacred. Do not rush to fill it. Carl Jung called this moment enantiodromia, the emergence of the opposite. After living with fire, the water comes. After striving with rage, calmness arises, and it confuses you, because your whole life, your engine was pain. When that engine dies, the silence isn't peace at first. It feels like death, but it is rebirth. Let me talk to you clearly, as a man to another man. You feel like your energy's gone. You've healed your past. You've journaled your trauma. You've forgiven your enemies. And now you can't get out of bed like you used to. You think maybe you've gone soft. You haven't. You're just not running on poison anymore. The modern world teaches men to operate on fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being average. But fear is a weak foundation for greatness. It creates results, yes. But it breeds paranoia, not peace. Contempt, not clarity. Now that you've faced your shadow, you must build from a deeper foundation. A foundation not of reaction, but of principle. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and Stoic, once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Not because the world rewards it, not because it's profitable, but because it is right. After shadow work, you are no longer controlled by compulsions. Now you must move from virtue. This is harder. This is lonelier, but it's where real men are forged. And yet the motivation still feels missing. Why? Because you haven't learned to live without the drama. When a man is addicted to his inner chaos, peace feels boring. But peace is not the end of growth. It is the beginning of depth. There's a story in Zen Buddhism of a student who asked the master, "What happens after enlightenment?" The master replied, "You carry water. You chop wood." The student was confused. "But that's what I did before." The master smiled. "Yes, but now you are awake. You still have to build the business, go to the gym, speak with courage, face rejection, wake up early. But now you do it not as a man trying to escape himself, but as a man in command of himself. And this is not easy. Friedrich Nietzsche said, He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. And this is what you need now. A new why. One that is not born from resistance, but from responsibility. Your new why must be this: to become what only you can become. Not for your mother's approval, not to outshine your peers, not to silence your critics, but because this world needs one man who does not move from ego, but from essence. Let me give you a day-to-day picture. You wake up, you don't feel fire, you feel dull. That's okay. You still shower, you still make your bed, you still journal, you go to the gym, not to punish yourself, but to honor the body that carries your soul. You speak to others with calmness. You listen more, you reflect more. You no longer seek drama to feel alive. You seek stillness to become real. You begin to act without needing a mood. You begin to choose your steps, even when you don't feel like walking. That's when power begins to return, not through rage, but through resolve. Søren Kierkegaard said, "The self is a relation that relates itself to itself." Once the noise is gone, the real relationship begins. You are building now not a reaction to the world, but a presence in it. Do you see the difference? The man before shadow work performed masculinity. He wore it like armor. He fought, postured, competed. But the man after shadow work embodies it. He leads silently. He listens deeply. He acts deliberately. And his motivation comes not from being seen, but from seeing clearly. This is the transition you're in. It's not a collapse. It's a reorientation. You are not lazy. You are shedding. You are not unmotivated. You are being reforged. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." So what if you don't feel like chasing what you used to? Let it go, let it die, and begin again. This world will try to lure you back into old wars. It will say, "Come fight for attention. Come chase applause. Come scream to be heard." But you must now ask yourself, do I need to be loud or do I need to be rooted? There's a reason many of history's greatest men entered a quiet period before greatness. Jesus had 40 days in the desert. Buddha had solitude under the Bodhi tree. Muhammad had his cave. The prophets of old, the warriors of wisdom, each withdrew before they returned with fire. And you too are in the desert now. But this is not punishment. It's purification. You are not meant to chase anymore. You are meant to create. And creation takes silence. Creation takes patience. Creation takes strength that does not shout, but stands. You're not here to be endlessly entertained. You're not here to live in the echo chambers of distraction, scrolling through lives that aren't yours. You're here to construct something sacred, yourself. But how can you build when the old fire is gone? The answer is simple, but brutal. You build anyway. You build not because you're inspired, but because you are responsible for your becoming. The era of accidental strength is over. Now comes the deliberate man. The man who wakes not from adrenaline, but from alignment. After you face your shadow, your inner house has no walls, no familiar pain to lean on, no loud voice to command your next move. This is when most young men feel abandoned by their own will. But this is not abandonment. It's evolution. The Roman philosopher Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." What you feel now, this lack of drive, is the early symptom of freedom. You are no longer ruled by compulsions, trauma, or false dreams. Now you must govern yourself by virtue. Virtue is a slow fire. It does not roar. It glows. Day by day, quietly, powerfully. You used to work because you were afraid of being broke. You trained because you hated how weak you felt. You studied because you feared irrelevance. But now you must do these things because they are right, because they align, because they are you. Let me speak to you clearly again, man to man. There will be mornings where you will feel hollow. The world will ask you, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you chasing the usual things? Status, sex, likes, image. And you will be tempted to plug back into the matrix, to pretend you care, to mimic the hunger of the past. Don't. Stay still. Listen to the silence. It is shaping you. Lao Tzu said, "At the center of your being, you have the answer. You know who you are. and you know what you want. But the center cannot speak when you are loud with false ambitions. Now that the noise is gone, the real voice begins to whisper. You don't need to force it. You need to listen. In a world obsessed with stimulation, stillness becomes rebellion. And in stillness, you will learn the hardest truth of all. The life you truly want is not made of moments of passion. It is made of the rituals you endure when no one claps. This is the deep work now. You wake up early not because you're chasing a deadline, but because you are becoming a man who keeps his word. You sit in silence, not to escape, but to confront your soul. You read, not to impress, but to digest. You lift not to conquer, but to build sanctuary in your body. This is what the shadow prepares you for. Not fame, not noise, not validation, but mastery of the inner world. Jacques Lacan, the postmodern psychoanalyst, wrote, "The only thing of which one can be guilty is of having given ground relative to one's desire." And that's what you must now ask yourself daily. Are you abandoning your highest desires, or are you building toward them quietly? Don't mistake quietness for weakness. Don't mistake calmness for collapse. Don't mistake stillness for death. You are being refined. Let me paint another picture for you. You walk into a room, 10 men are talking loud, performing status games, laughing too hard, dominating conversation. You sit in the corner, observing, listening. You speak little, but when you do, silence falls. Why? Because you carry presence, not performance. That is what the death of the false self gives you. Presence, gravity, weight. You don't need to dance for respect. You command it through stillness, through self-knowledge, through unwavering principles. And this begins now. You will no longer beg for purpose. You will build it. You will no longer ask for fire. You will light it slowly. You will no longer chase false gods. You will walk as one who knows he was born divine. Rumi once wrote, "You were born with wings, why prefer to crawl through life? The shadow work has broken your legs, only because you forgot you could fly." Now is the time to remember. Start again. Not with noise, with ritual. Every morning you wake, say less, think deeper, act truer. Ask yourself, what would a man of virtue, depth, and sovereignty do right now? Then do it. You won't always feel the surge. You won't always hear the applause. But every day you show up in silence, the new you is being etched into time. You are no longer building for the world to see. You are building so the world can stand on what you become. There comes a point in every man's journey when he realizes that the audience he once performed for has vanished. The cheers are gone. The critics are silent. The mirror no longer reflects the boy who needed validation to feel real. And in that sacred emptiness, he begins the final phase of becoming, not as a soldier of rage, but as an architect of meaning. This is where you are now. You've burned the old house. You've faced the shadow behind the curtain. You've let the illusion die. And now all that remains is the question, who will I be when I no longer need to be anything for anyone else? Nietzsche called this the moment of self-overcoming, not just self-control, not just discipline, but going beyond the self you were programmed to be. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly, he said. You've stopped chasing, you've stopped pretending, and now from this height, most people will not understand you. They will say you're lazy, you've changed, you've become cold. They're right. You're no longer burning from the same fuel. You are no longer addicted to the same noise. You are becoming someone they do not recognize. And that is proof of evolution. Let me speak again, young man, as though it were just you and me in this room. The shadow you faced revealed your deepest truths. You saw your wounds. You held your regrets in your hands like burning coals. You saw the parts of yourself you denied for years. Your fear of abandonment, your suppressed rage, your aching hunger for approval. And you didn't run. You stayed. That makes you dangerous in the best way. Now you must become useful to the world, not through noise, but through essence. You don't need to scream your value. You need to embody it in silence. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. What you build now, these rituals of silence, these daily practices done without applause, This is the slow birth of excellence. Wake up even when you're tired. Train even when there's no fire. Study even when no one is testing you. Meditate even when the silence makes you ache. These are not small acts. These are bricks. One by one, you are laying the foundation for a life of depth, a life only you can live. The ancient Stoics knew this path well. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." This new chapter is about wasting nothing, not your time, not your thoughts, not your presence. You walk into a room now, and you no longer need to dominate it. You are the storm, quiet, collected, watching. You don't need to prove that you've changed. The man you've become will radiate through the way you carry yourself. You're done with the shallow. You crave substance. You're not interested in being impressive. You're focused on being immovable. When you were driven by your shadow, your energy came from fear. What if I fail? What if I'm nothing? What if I die unknown? Now that fear has dissolved. What takes its place? Vision. Viktor Frankl, who survived hell on earth, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." That space, that stillness you feel now, that is your power. In that emptiness lies the new motivation, one that is not frantic, not desperate, but rooted. You're not hustling to escape a past anymore. You are planting for a future no one else can see. It's a slow growth. And yes, it's lonely, but it is the only path that leads to real legacy. Look at the greats. Marcus Aurelius journaled alone in battlefields. Da Vinci toiled in silence for years. Mandela sat for decades in prison, not with bitterness, but with vision. The masculine spirit doesn't demand a crowd. It demands conviction.